Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. A warm welcome to the T-Chat, Changes, Challenges, and Chances, a startup's guide to navigating the AI era. The T session represents trends, technology, and transformation, and is the signature event at E-Day. Today, we are honored to have two distinguished speakers to share their invaluable insights with us. They are Mr. Martin Karafilis, Chief Executive Officer of Fishburners, and Professor Keith Jackson, Chairman of the Hong Kong UK Business Forum. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Mr. Martin Karafilis.
Perfect. Hello, everyone. My name is Martin Karafilis. I am the CEO of Fishburners. For those that don't know Fishburners, we are Australia and one of the world's largest startup communities. We provide resources, information, a bunch of education, a great space for founders to come together for investment and other forms of networking. So founders can really become the best that they can possibly be and produce the best products that they can possibly produce. My background is tech and entrepreneurship. In fact, I've founded multiple businesses and been very lucky to have multiple successful exits. My last business that I started, I worked on for around about 7 years. I founded in 2015, 2016, which was a computer vision AI company. So you could imagine trying to raise capital in a whole different environment where 9 out of 10 of the investors would just laugh you out of the room because you mentioned artificial intelligence. It's a bit different to what we have now, where almost every single startup has AI embedded in either their technology or their business practices. So I'm going to share with you a little bit of my journey and a couple of the frameworks and things that I used that really helped me, I guess, achieve some form of success and made it easier along the way. So one of the first things that I really sort of learned, and it was something that there we go. Something that I learned is excellence is not perfection. So as founders, I definitely fell into this trap. I fell into the trap of saying, how do I produce the most perfect product I can possibly find? In fact, all you have to do is 2 things as a founder. Produce a product that's better than the current processes or solution, and produce it better than the competitors. If you do those 2 things, you are most likely going to succeed. It's not about creating the most successful product, but ensuring that you achieve those 2 things. And one of the ways in which I actually did this was work through the pre-mortem. I was able to create maps and work backwards from things that could go wrong. And what this did was it enabled me to manage risk proactively. I was able to make decisions along the way because I was able to see what was avoidable, what was unavoidable, and what I could anticipate along the journey. And as I went along this process, I started to realize that I still made a heap of mistakes as a founder. And that was something that really came across because I was juggling everything. And I started to realize that founders aren't superheroes. And what I started to realize is the more that I started to focus on what I was good at, the more success that started to come. And that was something that I looked at when I was looking at scaling a company. Anytime you're looking at scaling a company is about expanding your circle of competence. So the way in which I did this was hire experts, professionals in certain fields that then enabled that to expand. Something that's a little bit different now, we talk about the AI era, is in fact, you can infinitely expand your competence. Through use of AI tools, you're actually able to present to investors an ability to go into new markets, to produce new products, to work on technical products that maybe you originally didn't have any experience in. And you start to piece this together, and then all of a sudden, you sit there and think to yourself, how do I actually win? So I was in San Francisco in the Y Combinator office, and I was asked this from the YC team, how do you know how you win? So my answer was pretty straightforward. I was working on an innovative technology that the market couldn't actually adopt. So my answer was to create some form of way for the industry and market to adopt this technology. That made us first, and we could actually control how the industry adopted that technology thereafter. And I see this now with Fishburners, where we see thousands of companies that come across our space and the decks that they send to me every single day. The question is, how do you win? And this is something, as a founder, it's something that it's really important to find the intersect between three different areas. If you can put your focus between what you're best at, what you're most passionate about, and the economic engine that drives your business, you are almost certainly going to find some form of success in your business and your startup. A good example of this, when I was scaling the business, finding that I could hire the best engineer, absolutely best, but had no passion for the problem they were solving. And what that meant was the path that they went down to solve that became probably not the most effective, the most efficient, and definitely not the most scalable. So you start to piece this together, and then you start to get a little bit of feedback. And some things work, some things don't work. You're starting to work out, how do I go about this? So the question comes about is, why now? So I now get the ability to live on the sideline and invest in startups as an angel investor. And I ask this question to every single startup: why am I investing in your company right now? And you should be asking this as a startup as well. Why am I producing this product right now? Why am I going to market with this right now? What's the roadmap? What does that look like? One of the ways in which you can actually do this is through feedback loops. This is fundamentally one of the key pillars of your business that enables you to showcase to an investor why now. But I would say a word of caution. Has anyone ever heard of the saying, if you want the wrong advice, just ask everyone? We're in an era now when we talk about AI and the use of AI as being something that you can gather the best information and quality information, analyze that, and implement a solution far faster than what we ever could. And it's also something about startups and keeping that form of agility and ability to go forward in an innovative way. If you can adopt this technology and the new traits faster than what the competitors, faster than what any of the incumbents can do, you will almost certainly be successful. And with this kind of feedback and this kind of mechanism, it was one of those kind of things that I definitely learned, and what I look at now as an investor, about how you can change an industry. When I invest in companies now, I look at companies that can change an industry that has not changed for tens of years. Getting towards the end of this presentation, I'll leave you with a quote. If you have always done it that way, it is probably wrong. And I want that to sink in. How many times have you heard about a person saying, hey, I had this idea, I created Uber before Uber. I created Netflix before Netflix, and it just never took off. Well, that's all a timing factor that's there. But it's something more importantly is, look at the industries that haven't changed at all. This is how, as an investor, I can get a much higher return on my investment, but it's how you can have a bigger impact. A good example of this is ordering through a QR code. An industry where for tens of years, a person has come to you for your order and put that through a POS system. Small innovation, able to take drastic investment, build massive teams, and create some of the best companies in the world. My name is Martin Karafilis. I have written a book on this and my journey. If you are interested, it's called Crazy or Genius. You can purchase it online from my website or from Amazon. If you do have any questions, I will be around. But hopefully that was a bit of value for you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin, for your enlightening presentation. Please take your seat. Now, please give a round of applause to Professor Keith Jackson.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Professor Keith Jackson. I have spent more than 35 years building, scaling companies. I've sat on more than 20 boards, and I have developed, manufactured, and exported medical products, in particular, to more than 70 countries. I've been really fortunate. I am a really curious person. I'm a lifelong learner. I've had the opportunity to work with, to visit, and to learn from some fantastic businesses, from the San Francisco Bay Area to the Greater Bay Area. And those learnings have really helped me on my scale-up journeys. I mentor startups, and from my perspective, the three key issues I come across are developing a product, finding people, full stop, and securing finance, of course. But the lens that I try and encourage my mentees to look through is to develop a product that helps customers do their job better, to find people not only that can do the work, but actually you can learn from. They bring different skills, different experiences to the team. And of course, from an investor's perspective, to secure finance to develop your business, not just to pay your salary. But ultimately, it's a world in which you're juggling many things. You're trying to develop your identity, your product identity, your business's identity while remaining agile. And it is often, most days, about survival. There's an abundance of ideas, of energy, and of intellect, and ambition in startups. But two things that are often in short supply are time and experience. But we can augment that by looking outside the organization. We can look to mentors, advisors. We can talk to our investors. They've got a wealth of experience. They want to help get a return. We can collaborate. We can actually work with others up and down our supply chains, as well as other startups, perhaps. And yes, AI can help to make us more productive, thereby saving time, but also giving us insights that would only otherwise come from a lot more experience. Growing businesses, scaling businesses, is tough. It's tougher than starting a business. No surprises there. And it takes time. Exponential growth is really, really hard to do. You really have to have something that's extremely well differentiated, unique almost, and you have to do that extremely well. Most businesses that scale do that in a more linear fashion, but what we can do, if we do the right things in the right order, in the right way, is to change the gradient of that linear growth. So yes, we need disruption if we're truly going to grow exponentially, but to be extremely disruptive. But ultimately, all growth requires constant learning, continuous improvement, and learning usually precedes change. So never stop learning. And we must not forget that from our investors' point of view, it's all about delivering a return on investment. It's not just about the impact that you make in society. So we need to keep that lens sharp and clean. So I perhaps think of 7 tenets for scaling profitably. I'm going to talk about a couple of these, 2 or 3 of these. But I think ultimately it's about professionalizing what you do, whatever aspect we look at. So it does start to become much more important to be focused, to be consistent, and to drive success however you decide to measure that. Let's just talk about a few of those. And let me start with people. People first, that's the most important step. What is often missing is the importance of developing your leadership skills. So yes, you can learn about that, you can read about that, but there's nothing beats putting that into practice. Because to scale, you can't do it on your own. You're going to have to deliver through others. And you're going to deliver through others who are empowered, who are motivated, inspired, and have autonomy. So that leadership piece is really important, as is culture. Culture has a very positive effect, not just on revenue, but on profitability. So as a leader, having core values at the heart of your organization that determine not just how you do things, but drive decisions as well, really, really important to shape that culture. And as I mentioned, not all of the resources, the human resources you have, are inside the business. We can draw upon externals, such as advisors and mentors, and maybe collaborators. And AI can be supportive. In particular, we can have personalized learning development plans for our individuals because, as I mentioned, learning precedes change. We've got to move from one product to multiple products. And importantly, we need to focus on how do we solve customers' problems. Not that we've got some great technology that customers will, of course, be delighted with, but we start with the customer in mind. We also, part of that product equation is our brand. We need to be a company that people know about and trust. And we can use customer advocates, again, another external resource we can draw upon. We need to use customers because they are a very valuable resource, not just for revenue, but ideas, support, marketing. So bringing customers and using customers in a sensible way is really helpful. And of course, there are other ways in which we can accelerate some of this. We can use AI to help analyze customer feedback, market trends. We can also accelerate time to market. Very important. We're in a race with our competitors. Process. So it's all very well finding your way, and that's okay, in an emergent way, in learning, developing what you're doing. But we need to become more disciplined. And importantly, people can't keep coming to you as the founder every time they want a guidance on how to do something. We need to embed processes so it becomes consistent and it becomes repeatable. And importantly, it delivers an excellent customer experience. One of those processes, really, really fundamental, is not to have an emergent strategy, but to be much more deliberate about what you're doing. And to have some vital few goals for the business, for your teams, and for each individual, so we can see progress. And of course, as part of those processes, AI has a role to play in automation, in optimizing, and actually, importantly, when we're looking at strategy, in scenario modeling. So actually running scenarios, particularly around finances, about our choices. Places. It's natural that you start in one market. Part of the scaling journey is to go to multiple markets. That can be tough. It can be very resource hungry, and it has lots of risks. And quite often, for small companies, we'll do that through strategic partners. We have to be careful how we select those. We need a strategy. We need to nurture relationships. We can actually draw upon AI to do some quite targeted market research. We can run a number of different scenarios about our efforts and what cost we might incur, including regulatory or certification. So we can do some financial planning. We can use AI tools to support that. And most importantly, because what's most important is the customer, in those different markets, we will need to have a different approach how we present the product. So how we communicate the value of that product and actually target those messages to the right audience. We can use AI to support that too. So scaling up has its challenges. I think for me, these are the most fundamental ones. Finding better talent, that might be better talent than you as the founder. Accessing more markets, multiple markets. Access to finance, and importantly, an ability to build your leadership capability and capacity, which requires some experience. It's not just something you can learn. You have to go and deploy that and learn from doing so. But there are resources outside the organization you can draw upon, including strategic partners and including customers. Never underestimate their value. I'm Keith Jackson. I'm here to connect and to collaborate and to support founders on their scale-up journey. I think one final message is that AI is a tool that I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, are using. The thing to do is to start somewhere. Start with one thing and learn how you deploy AI and how you use that to drive value in your organization. Because if you're not, your competitors certainly are. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith, for your wonderful presentation. Please take your seats on the stage. Before we move on to the panel discussion, I am pleased to introduce our moderator, Mrs. Carmen Salameh, founder and host of the Asian Business Owners Podcast and founder of Octo. May I now invite Carmen and Martin come on the stage. If you would like to ask Martin and Keith any questions, please post your questions via Slido. Simply scan the QR code shown on the screen now, then choose A3 and submit your question. Selected questions will be addressed by Carmen. Carmen, I'll pass the stage to you.
So question to both of you. Yes, AI is something that can be valuable for a business, and it's also a buzzword. So what are the limits of AI-powered startups? How not to fall in the trap of, following the AI trends, and instead of capitalizing on AI to grow and be sustainable?
So I'll probably just start in the idea that when you're looking at using AI as a company, there's probably two sides to that, is product and outward facing, and there's also inward facing and process driven AI within your company. I think be very cautious of adding AI to your solution for the sake of adding AI to your solution, but almost certainly internally in your practices, and a lot to take away from Keith's amazing presentation as well, around how can you start to create some of that process, how can you start to optimize on some of that using AI, is super important. And if we look at this, it's very similar to the dot-com bubble and early on in the internet phase, where you wouldn't see people coming out and saying we're an internet business. Everybody's online now, and quite frankly, I think you're missing out if you're not online. AI is very much so the same. It's a tool in which you're using within your business, and I think, as we sort of start to go down that track, and I'll say this from experience of having an AI company from very early stages, from 2015 or 16, where knowing that this was going to start to come about, where this is starting to embed within your businesses, that's really important, just to make sure that you're staying up to date with those trends and that you're embedding that in a manner that is scalable in itself. So I think what the biggest blocker, or one of the biggest challenges, is the fact that when you're embedding AI into your business, you're not doing that in a scalable way. You believe that you're, in fact, adding this to make your business more scalable, but you need to understand that you will eventually have to scale that piece of your business as well.
Yeah, some great points, Martin. Just to add to that, I think targeting, it's not a panacea. It's not a silver bullet. You've got to use it selectively in a targeted way and start by doing something, because we're all learning. It's new. We're all learning how to use and deploy AI in a supportive way. What I would also add is a note of caution, which is what my experience has taught me, is people buy from people, and artificial intelligence is not emotional intelligence. And actually, a lot of business derives from relationships, nurturing those relationships, and particularly as you expand to lots of markets, doing that with some intercultural communication competence. AI can't replace human beings. So actually, I think use it appropriately, but also be mindful that there are times when you can't use AI and you shouldn't use AI.
Yeah, but the beauty is, Keith, we can both have AI that are doing the deal for us, and we'll go get beers or something like that.
Exactly. So we're forging the relationship, so we trust each other and we enjoy some good times, make some happy memories. Yes.
And during COVID, we saw a lot of businesses in the edtech industry growing. It was a good time for that. But apart from this industry, are there any others that have unexpectedly grown over the past years within the AI era?
Expected or unexpected, I think the biggest thing is policy more than anything that's preventing a lot of growth from an industry perspective. I would say that there's so much advancement from a healthcare and medical perspective, but the commercialization aspect of that is very difficult from a government policy aspect. So, and probably as we start to get down an ethical aspect as well. So, maybe it's surprising or not surprising, but that's the biggest blocker. So any industry that doesn't have that blocking is going to have the most amount of advancement.
Yeah, I would concur. I think healthcare has benefited hugely from AI, not just in diagnostics. I think we've all seen reports of medical images being analysed at breakneck speed. And actually then the specialist with 20 years experience is only drawn in to look at the exceptions. So it's actually a great way of filtering. But I think you're right, but there's an appropriate level of regulation, not surprisingly, in medical products. But there is so much opportunity to use AI in the medical arena. It's a very broad church, from pharma through to medical devices, medical equipment. Such a broad church. There's massive opportunities for AI in that, and we're seeing that coming through now. It's exciting.
So for this question, I think it was appropriate to get inspired by ChatGPT, right? I wanted to cover a different angle, a more ethical angle. So how can we ensure ethical AI deployment to address bias and transparency while staying competitive and keep growing in a fast-paced market?
I think I'll start with governance. So a lot of people think governance is compliance. It's not, it's about performance. If you have robust systems and process in place to make the right decisions at the right time, that's good governance. And I think actually what we always need to be mindful of is, what's our compass? So you talked about ethical. The best businesses have a really strong culture built on 3 values. 3 values as verbs, so people can do it. And actually, if you have that as your compass bearing when you're making decisions, think of AI as an advisor. It's providing data, it's doing some analytics, it's providing options, but ultimately, you are in charge of that business and you are legally responsible. AI isn't. So actually use it as a guide.
Yeah, I'll echo that as well. I think governance, I kind of think of it in the exact same way. If you've just had a child, your child's 2 years old and learning all of these amazing things. As a parent, you've got a bunch of values that you're teaching your kid, and the way that you bring up your child is the exact same way that you're looking at AI within the workplace or within your product or what you're doing. So I think it's one of those elements that is no different to how you would create procedure and governance around employing employees and how they go about their work ethic and how they produce products. It's exactly the same when you talk about the use of AI from a governance aspect internally as a business, but there's also some responsibility from a government aspect as well that comes into that.
Keith, you mentioned that you help startups grow and scale and expand globally, but this is a question for both of you. So for early stage startups, what should they start building now to prepare for the future and facilitate potential global expansion?
I think when you're developing your solution, of course you start with the customer. But who is the customer? If your ambition is to go global, you're going to have a lot of different customers with a lot of different needs and wants and a lot of different perspectives. So I guess broadening your thinking as to who that customer persona may be. I think the second thing that I found really helpful is really early on, when you're building your team, look for diversity in your team. Not just to tick a box, to actually have diversity of thinking. That's really important for innovation. But also what it does help is when you start to go global, you have different cultural lenses, you have different perspectives. The organization learns to behave in a certain way because it's familiar with navigating that diversity. I think that's a really, really important thing that's often overlooked.
Yeah, I think I touched on it in my presentation. I think for any founder, starting with the hedgehog concept really is like focus somewhere between your economic engine, what you're passionate about, and what you're best at. If you can start there on your own level, find a problem, and it comes under that passionate aspect. If you find a problem that's worth solving, you'll find a way to solve that. And I think how you go about building that from an early stage. That's changing every single day, but for me, it's like find that first, and the rest will start to come.
Now we have a few questions from the audience. So there's one that is, how does AI impact job market until now? This is a broad question, right?
Who knows? It's new and it's evolving very fast. But here's a parallel. The parallel is that maybe 25 years ago, I remember those days, there was a lot of automation taking place, particularly in manufacturing. And people think, well, we'll lose our jobs. No, you just elevate those jobs to the next level of value. So you move people up the value chain with better skills, designing or developing products rather than making the products. I think there's something here. There's a parallel here with AI. Actually, if we're no longer using our hands to make the products because we've gone through automation learning cycle, we're now maybe actually, AI is supportive of our learning and our analytics and our data gathering. So actually we can elevate to making decisions, perhaps better decisions based on that.
Yeah, it's interesting. My last startup, actually, we were in automation in retail sector. So the computer vision technology would actually remove a lot of needs of people on the front end of a store through stock replenishment, through checkout processes. And we actually copped a whole heap of backlash for a long period of time about taking away jobs. And this was a really interesting statistic that came back that, in fact, we increased the amount of jobs within the sector by 2 times. So we introduced a form of technology that then needed a bunch of engineers. We needed people within the workforce and within the industry that actually started to adopt this technology. And we found that retailers were starting to create full innovation tech teams, IT teams that revolved around the automation of their store. So we just saw that move from a different part of the actual customer. And I think as an industry as a whole as well, this is what we're going to see. We're going to see we have a whole new industry that's created when we look at AI, and we're starting to create new industries, and we're starting to create new sectors and ways to do that. And it's just a matter about, how we go about where the jobs move and what the key education pieces are. There's a whole role for universities and government to actually play in there around upskilling and ensuring that we have the right talent coming through for those areas.
Perhaps just add something to that, which I mentioned the importance of lifelong learning, and that never stops. There's always something new you can learn, and the world keeps changing. I think one thing we've all got to think about is probably 50% of the jobs people will have in 20 years' time haven't even been invented yet. So it's not about losing jobs, it's about evolving, doing different things.
Maybe 2 more questions. So there's one. How do you see the use of AI, not just as a tool or as a part of a product, but as an autonomous actor making decisions on its own and running parts of the company autonomously? This is a little bit challenging, given what we just said.
Yeah, I think one thing you learn as a leader is you can't be the bottleneck. You've got to empower and give autonomy to your team appropriately to make decisions, not just to do things. So I guess maybe it's just another step along that journey, is maybe there are things with the right controls that you can empower AI to do for you as part of the automation process. So I think at the appropriate level of decision, and you've got to put that through a risk management assessment. So actually, if you've got the right risk appetite, and you've got the right measures and controls, why would you not let AI make decisions? But it's all about that appropriateness.
Yeah, I think as well, we're at a stage when we look at AI at the moment, again, just taking from my experiences of working in this over the last sort of 12 years or so, we're not even sort of touching the surface of what's going to be commercialized from this technology. So there's all kinds of different levels of AI that we look at, and from a deep tech level, there's a whole heap of technology that is just not commercialized at the moment. Something as simple as ChatGPT is just the surface level of what we know, and when we talk about decision making and those processes in an organization, I think right now we can't sit up here on a stage and say this is exactly how it's going to be, because we're only really just touching the surface of what's being commercialized. So it's just a matter of pace. And what I would say is that if you're utilizing the current tools that are there, make sure that you're looking at the feedback mechanisms and understand, if they're on the right track and everything's happening. I also see that there's no reason not to adopt to allow them to make decisions. So,
Right. One last question. From an investor's perspective, what do small e-commerce companies need to pay attention to when seeking investment? And I guess it can be also for small, early stage startups, not only e-commerce, I guess.
Yeah, I think, can you just repeat the question just one more
Sure.
time?
What do small e-commerce companies need to pay attention to when seeking investment?
I think it's the same for any business, not just e-commerce businesses. But the reality is, how do you start to reduce your execution risk? So the biggest risk for any business is execution risk. And at the earliest stages, it's the only risk, actually. So whatever the measures are that you're taking, make sure that they're front and center for the investor to see. Okay, maybe it's a capability statement. We have the best engineering team, or we have the best salespeople that have all the connections. Hey, as an investor, I'm like, okay, that's a piece of that risk that I don't have to worry about. If it's if it's just a funding aspect, hey, we've already got a bunch of funding in the bank. We have a runway of a couple of years, so there's no real risk of us running out of money. As an investor, it's ironic, right? Is that you have money, I want to give you more money. It's one of those things that as a startup, just make sure that that's the key of what you're looking for.
Yeah, I would just build on that. I think risk is something that's often overlooked or not given enough attention, perhaps. So founders tend to be very enthusiastic, very energetic, very optimistic, otherwise you wouldn't be doing it. But often it's the risks or the unseen risks that are not thoroughly assessed. AI can help with that. One of the key risks is actually key employee flight. So one of the things investors look at is not just you and the senior team, but actually what have you got in place to develop the people? Because they all need to learn if you're going to change and evolve. What about succession planning? Where have you identified gaps in knowledge, including yourself? Because you need to develop the skills needed for the next stage of the journey before you get there. And actually, how can you augment that? How can you fill some of those gaps creatively with a limited budget? Maybe actually there's scope to bring people in, advisors part-time, just pay for the time that you need rather than employ them. So I think, yeah, people bit is part of the risk register, and that needs a lot of attention.
If, still on this question, if each of you could give one piece of advice to startup founders to approach investors, what would it be? I know, only one each.
I think coming back to the presentation is actually how you win. I think that can encompass a lot as a founder. If I'm an investor, I'm consistently wondering, as you as a startup and you as a founder, how do you win? How are you beating your competitor? How are you better than what's out there that's existing already? And what do you see that's coming in the future as well? And that's really important for me. If you have a really solid answer for that, realistically, a lot of the analytics just have to come behind that.
Yeah, I perhaps have a slightly different perspective, just to add to that, which is an investor-founder relationship is a partnership. It's a strategic partnership. You're going on a journey together. And it's important if you're in a relationship, you get on. So actually, that needs to be part of the dialogue. Can we work together, and will we bring the best out in each other? And then you need to, once you've started, you need to invest time, not just in reporting to the investors about how you're going, what the challenges are, what the progress is, but actually an ongoing dialogue and use their experience and their knowledge. So yeah, you've got to nurture that relationship like any good relationships.
I mean, not to go too deep on that question anyway, every phase of the business is very different, and investment is more so than anything else. So you look at product, or you look at, when you look at scaling your business, if you go and look at every company's pitch deck from idea stage right through to, say, Series D, they drastically change, and what's required changes as well. So one answer across the board's pretty tough, I think, but every stage is different.
Thank you both. Thank you, Keith. Thank you, Martin. Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you all for your insightful sharing, and I'm sure our audience has learned a lot from you.